In this section, we will listen to Louise Lawrence-Israels talking about the time after the war. Then we will listen to Tigist Whip's research on Louise' post-war life. Then we will listen to Katie Corcom's research on Netherlands after the war.
The day of liberation there was a lot of ruckus on the street. My dad looked out the window to the street down below, and of course we as children were wondering, "Oh, what's he doing?" The noise got louder, even on the 4th floor, and he looked back and said, "I think we're free. I think peace has finally arrived." He got off the chair, and before he even explained what freedom or peace meant, walked over to the cupboard where he had his last tin of cookies. We had one tin, miraculously, left. He took the tape off, put it on the floor, and said, "Everybody can eat as many cookies as they want." That I remember, but we were always given a piece of cookie, so this time we could just grab. So we did, but you look, and as a child you don't know where to start, so after eating one cookie we weren't hungry anymore, kind of put the other one back for next time. Then our parents did explain to us what it meant to be free, and it completely went over us because we just didn't know. We knew one life, and that was inside, and that was fine. My parents had tried so hard to give us a normal life. They kept us busy with little pieces of paper, little pieces of scrap, whatever you do with a child, and they kept us busy. They tried to keep all the fear away from us, too. The only time I remember being really afraid is when one time we must have been betrayed. A loud banging came on the door, and when my father let the people in, they started screaming at us and took my father away. He later escaped, but that was the fear that made the most impression on us children. So they waited a day to make sure it was safe, and then my parents took my brother and myself to the park we had lived across from for 3 years. We walked down the 4 flights of stairs and went outside to the grass field. This was very strange to us then. We were standing on the grass field, holding on to each other for dear life because now we're really scared. We wanted to go back inside. We didn't know this outside world. We thought, if this is what is meant to be free, then we didn't want to be free. We started crying and asked if we could go back in. My mom became all of a sudden so sad that she started crying. And I remember that, even though we went inside, she must have cried the rest of the day. She couldn't stop anymore. All this tension kind of went. But children are resilient. They told my brother and I our real names, and I guess 2 days later they tried it again and took us outside. We didn't want to, you know, but what your parents tell you, you do. So on the street walked all these Canadian soldiers. But the best part was they smiled at children, and a child feels if a person is good or not in general. So besides smiling and trying to talk to us, and we had no idea what they were saying because we did not speak English, but they pulled Hershey bars out of their pockets and gave us Hershey bars. You can imagine, the next day we wanted to go out again. My parents made a decision that they were never going to talk about the war experience. They were too sad. We lost a lot of relatives, and they were sad, but they didn't want to burden us with that. So we should have a normal life and not know anything else. They did not want to have anything to do with religion, because if you were religious and you belonged to a group, you were on a list, and they were always afraid of that, all their lives. And it doesn't work like that, of course. You're always on a list. I remember when my dad thought it was time for us to have passports, and when the passports came, they were not like they are today. They were just pieces of paper. Today it's plasticized for security and all that. But he taught us that if we came in a situation that we didn't trust, we should rip our name page out of the passport and chew it up and swallow it. And he made us eat paper to taste what it was like. They were afraid all their lives. We moved for a couple of years to Sweden, where my father had a job, because he didn't have a job anymore in Holland. And then in 1948, the Dutch government asked him to come back and try to jump-start the business that had been confiscated. And he did. And I went to school in Holland. It was wonderful to be with other children for the first time. Not always. My brother, who I dearly loved and love, was around my neck and holding my hand. And at this time I had friends.
Louise's family never spoken about the war. Short time after the war, Louise's mother had another child. In 1946, Louise's family, including her baby sister, moved to Sweden. A few years later, they moved back to the Netherlands. Louise received her degrees in physical therapy after studying in Netherlands. In 1965, Louise married Louise Lawrence, an American medical student to study in Amsterdam. In 1967, they agreed to move to America. This is how Louise and her family lived after the war.
Holland was liberated in spring 1945. Only 25% of all pre-war Dutch Jews survived to see the Allies win the war. Many of the Dutch Jews that survived the war managed to do so by going into hiding, like Louise and her family. Over 20,000 Dutch Jews went into hiding, and 2/3 of that number survived. 4,500 of those Jews, including Louise and her brother, were children hiding from the Nazis. Day of Liberation, Canadian soldiers walked through the streets, cheered on by the Dutch people they had freed.